Hi everyone, I'm the Broken Meeple. Win or lose, I'm going to be honest with you. This is 2026, but we still got to cover some games for 2025, and for starters, we've got Coming of Age. Danny Garcia and Lunanova Games. Now, Danny Garcia has done a couple of games from Essen, and I hopefully will be covering this other one as well, but this is the one I was more interested in. This is got some thematic ties to Pursuit of Happiness, a game that I really enjoy, love it. It's basically Game of Life, the Euro edition. If you want more detail, just go check out my many videos I've done on it and its expansions. It's a game I really like, hence it's got the big deluxe crate behind me. This is kind of telling a similar sort of story. You're playing through a teenage life from childhood to the point where you start preparing for adulthood, basically. And the idea is that you're developing your character, you're gaining VPs, but they call them experience points, and you're maintaining your different moods, your personality traits, getting life experiences, making friends, all those sort of things that you would do in a typical Game of Life game, and seeing who's done the best out of everybody. The theme alone made me go, ooh, I want to check this out. Forget the cover, forget the fact that, Ida Valls does the artwork, who's done some pretty good stuff before. Danny Garcia's games, I don't tend to go mad for. I mean, there's some I've played, some I don't like, but I would just like, okay, theme-wise, I'm in. Costs a pretty penny. I think this one was a good 60 to 70 euro when you bought it at Essen. It was not cheap, but I'm hoping that it was going to be a solid game. Something that could coincide with Pursuit. It was never going to replace it, but I wanted something else in that type of genre. So with any luck, this will do it for me. 1 to 4 players, 40 to 80 minutes. Here's hoping.
Get on with it.
So in Coming of Age, you have your player board, which is basically your face with the front half shaved off.
The face.
Okay, maybe not literally, but it's got ears coming out the side, you've got hair on top, and then it's got all your different mood swings and points on it. So if it's not face off, it's basically inside out. It's going to be one of those two. But the idea is that this board contains 2 very important tracks for you. It's got all your mood swing tracks and your friendship tracks. Friendships you can build up during the game, gaining bonuses and associating with like different neutral people or even other players when you go through. But the main idea is that you have got these tracks that represent mood swings. So you've got one that's sort of to do with your general boredom, one that's due to your active lifestyle, one's your popularity, one's your intelligence, one's your stress levels. And the idea is that by manipulating these left and right, you will gain bonuses throughout the game, generate some kind of little engine in terms of resource gathering, and use this to fulfill the criteria for memory cards that will get you point bonuses, as well as your own personal goals and traits, which can get you other bonuses and as well life points. The main board is set up with a bunch of locations. They will open up as the game goes on. You only start off with a few. They represent like school, pizza, arcade, all the places that kids do. And you will have access to a D4 dice to begin with, but as the game goes on, you will have access to different mood tracks on your board, and this will also open up more locations on the main board and also give you access to bigger dice. You can get hold of D6s and D10s in order to decide where it is you want to go, and even D8. So you've got all the D&D dice that you ever need there. What you'll do is that everybody will roll the dice simultaneously, and this number will dictate which location you're likely going to visit on this board. However, you can spend willpower tokens and various other things in order to kind of say, you know what, I fancy going to a different one. I want to go to a different spot. Once you've decided which location you're going to be, you get to experience a location. This allows you to mess around with your mood swing tracks, moving them up or down toward left to right, basically. And there's a good and a bad side to it. Yes, there are bonuses to going up higher on these tracks, but you get the instant effect bonus regardless of which way it moves. So there's actually a balancing act of moving them to the right and to the left. It's not necessarily a bad thing to have a lower mood swing. But also at the location, you will be able to access these memory cards. These memory cards allow you to spend these motivation tokens that you'll have collected during the game, and these get you victory points as well as other bonuses, and these memory tokens which also can be converted into mood swing like movements on your markers and other bonuses besides. While you're also there, you can interact with friends. Now, some of them are just going to be neutral friends that are featured like so, but players also have access to their own markers and friends. So if you go to somewhere where somebody else is, then basically this marker can go on your board. It's a track that every time you influence them, they basically level up and get you more points and bonuses. But while you're friends with somebody, you're able to mimic some of the traits that they do. Players have access to trait tiles that they will accumulate as the game goes on. You can play 4 of them, and basically it's a case of, do you have 3 purple memory tokens, in which case get some points. Do you have a friendship at level 4, right, get some points. You know, they're basically little mini objectives. But when you place them on your board, you free up these little mimic tokens, and this allows you to mimic an objective that somebody else has done. So if somebody else has got one that says, right, I need to have a, let's take a good example here. You know, I just need to have a red memory token. Okay, cool. Well, I've now got a red memory token. Here we go. See, one that I fished out right now. So now I can actually mimic this person's other trait, providing I'm friends with them. It's a sort of minor piece of interaction. In future rounds, you'll have access to different dice because you'll open up mood tracks, but you only use one at a time. So you'll have rolled some, you'll pick one of them as the location, and the others will come back. This, though, allows you to put interest tokens on the board, which is basically to say that you have an interest in a location, you just haven't gone to it yet. The benefit of that is that if you go visit it later, you get some personal fulfillment bonus for doing so. I mean, you're a kid, you have dreams, you have aspirations, you want to go out and do stuff, you don't have time for everything, so you gotta try and plan your life accordingly. The game is played effectively over 9 turns, so you'll have 1 turn with a D4, you'll have 2 turns with a D6, and then 3 turns each with a D8 and a D10, which is basically representing all the different mood swings that you gotta go across. Once all the 9 turns are done, check out your endgame scoring bonuses from any objectives you started the game with, and see who's got the most points.
Of course!
Starting with the pros, yes, this cost a pretty penny. It was not cheap. I mean, I can't remember the exact price, but I swear it was at least €60, if not more. It was pretty pricey for this game, but it is well produced, I gotta say. In many ways, maybe a little overproduced for what you're actually doing. I mean, these boards, the dual layer, the tiles are nice and thick. You've got these little wooden tokens with screen printed designs on them, and they're pretty decent designs as well. Everything slides nicely, nothing feels loose or, you know, flimsy or anything. Big shiny, you know, big wooden bus, but also a lot of these nice dice. I mean, these were the yellow ones, you know, you've got blue, green and red, and you know, they're very nice, good quality dice. If only you actually use these a bit more in the game. We'll get onto that a bit later. But everything else, you know, you've got solid wooden pieces for the friends, these, you know, nice cardboard tokens for the motivation tokens, and even the cards. You know, they're pretty thick cardstock. They're sort of like that glossy feel, so you should not need to sleeve these, really. All in all, it's a pretty solid production. And artwork, yeah, it's Iduvals. Iduvals, if I don't know if I pronounced his surname right, but you'll have heard his name on some other designs, and yeah, when he gets involved, the artwork is pretty decent, and it's definitely this kind of almost like sort of cartoonish kiddie look, which suits. You know, I like these pictures on these memory cards in particular. You know, they've got all sorts of different things, like, you know, you're reading the books, you graduate. I mean, definitely this has got a kind of university university theme there, but you know, you're stressed out, you're lying in a park, you're on your own just listening to your music in headphones, you're sort of showing off your new t-shirt in a mirror or something, you're on the swing contemplating the fact that you're a bit lonely. It's you know, there's a lot of good, you know, imagery here, and coupled with the design, yeah, you're getting your money's worth in terms of the production quality.
Ooh, you good looking. You're hot.
Now, the theme was important for me. I wanted the theme in this to be pretty strong so that I could get into this in much the same way as Pursuit. It's, for the most part, pretty good. I say for the most part. It's not as strong, I think, as Pursuit. Pursuit with the cards and all the other things you're doing, I think the theme just works really, really well, even though you are basically just collecting cards and moving on bonuses now. This one does have a decent amount of theme. I mean, it represents what you're doing as a kid, making friends, having these mood swings, particularly, you know, teenagers. What can you say for all the parents out there? But you know, going to these different locations and what type of mood swings they give you. Now, if I go to the sports stadium, oh, it's making me more active, it's making me a bit more popular, but, you know, not doing anything for my intellectual creativity side. You know, they make sense. Sometimes you need support from the parents when you're young. Again, that makes sense. Making friendships. Friendships can be basic, but they get stronger over time, can get quite intimate, you know, so there's some decent amount of theme here. But I feel like you have to search for it a little bit more. It's not quite as evident. The theme is there, but sometimes you don't recognize why it's there at first until somebody explains it to you. One classic example is these frustration tokens and the way they work. Frustration tokens are basically a negative. So when you get them, you place them on the track at the far end where it covers up like the benefit for being at the higher track. Okay, so that's a bad thing. When your marker reaches the top of said track, you take the token, you flip it over and put it on the lower side of the track. but nothing else happens. It's freed up the top bit, but then what happens is when your mood swing goes all the way back down to the other side, you take the token off and gain points rather than lose them, which is what normally happens when you go too far down.
I don't get it.
That in itself sounds a bit weird. Like, I still probably to this day don't actually fully quite understand how that thematically makes sense. You've overcome your frustration, yes, but why do I then have to make my mood worse to sort of recognize the experience from it? It's a little odd, and I'm sure there's a reason for it, but when you encounter it, much like some of the other stuff in this game, it feels just that little bit mechanical, that little bit like, I don't know, is this a paced-on job or not? And then you get explained and you realize it's not a paced-on job, but it's just not as evident. It's not like coming out straight at you.
Something's missing.
The gameplay is relatively light. There's not a huge amount of like in-depth thinking that you got to do here. Most of it stems from messing around with these mood tracks. Deciding which location you go to rewards you with the mood swings, and experiencing what you're going to do with these memory cards will give you a bonus that may include these that mess around with your mood swings as well, or give you some other type of bonus. But there's two things that you're really trying to do. You're trying to fulfill your objectives that you started with, as well as further trait tiles during the game. That's always well and good, and mimicking other people's as well, another way to get good points. But it's basically a case of messing around with your face board, as we'll call it, to mess around with the mood swing markers. 5 different tracks, a personal fulfillment track, which honestly feels like a bit of a tacked on mechanic. It's just another track that levels for bonuses. I think you could have cut that out of the game and it wouldn't have made much difference. But the friendship one is quite nice. It's an interesting one, leveling up the different friend markers, choosing which bonus you want at different levels, needing a further sort of intimacy bonus to get it to the higher levels for really good points, and it adds to that theme. But it's really the juggling of these mood swing markers, because when you get it to the very top, you have a passive bonus and some further rewards from these tokens. But then when you get it to the lower end, you could get frustrated, you could lose points. But every time you move a marker, you're getting an instant bonus, and it's just all the bonuses that you generate from those mood markers going up and down, up and down, up and down is what powers your engine going forward. The board has a bit of an evolving state, because you start off with only a few locations, like 4 locations are open, and you only have access obviously to your D4 as a result. Not many to choose from, everybody kind of goes to similar locations, but then as the first 3 rounds occur, then more stuff opens up. So, suddenly you've now got 6 locations to pick from, then you've got 8, then you've got 10, and, they all have different bonuses. They're all going to have, different of these cards. And so where you visit is going to be, influenced by that. There is an element of luck with the idea that you've got to roll dice. That is, I suppose, positive or negative. I mean, it's a simple idea, but I was kind of hoping that you did more with these dice, like you rolled them and you got to do all sorts with them, especially with the different sizes of them. But what it really all boils down to is basically you get the die just to match how many locations are available, you roll all of those dice, and basically they just give you options on where to go, and you allocate one at a time. I kind of maybe would have liked to just done a bit more with these dice, especially as they look so nice and they're good quality. But yeah, that's a little minor gripe. I was just kind of hoping that when I saw all these dice, it's like, oh, I'm going to do some cool juggling with this. And it's like, nah, it's just roll and allocate one. Oh, okay, fair enough. I mean, you could have probably substituted with a different mechanic, honestly. But, the gameplay is relatively light, and when you've got this theme at a reasonably strong level, you are, having jokes with your friends and sort of joking about how somebody's kid is, like, messed up by the weird mood swings that they're having.
He always had to be the center of attention.
And kind of comparing it to your own life. So there's an element of that comes through to make this game, not like a breeze. It's still got some decent little thinky depth to it, but it's a rewarding one. Every time you do something, you're getting some kind of bonus. Yes, you're moving up and down on these tracks, and you might occasionally get the odd penalty, but for the most part, you get a little something. You get a little something. You get a little something. And that on rinse repeat throughout the whole game makes it just feel cool. It makes it feel fulfilling, that you don't have turns that feel like garbage or anything. Each turn feels like you gained something nice. It's just, was it as good as somebody else's? The rules for this game are a little hit and miss. On the one hand, and I have been on a couple of rants with this lately with various other games, I am at least glad they put reference aids in the box. Now, you do only have one reference aid for the iconography with 2 separate languages on it, but you could probably hopefully find something on BGG and print another one of these off per player, because There's not tons of iconography in the game, but it's all pretty important and your board is littered with it, so you kind of do need to know what these mean. But I am glad that they at least give you a turn summary aid, so you've got some idea as to how the round plays out. Because if it didn't, I think this would be a bit of a chore to learn. The rulebook is not bad, but I've seen ones that are worded better. It uses a lot of terminology for things like personal fulfillment, mood track, friendship track, memory tokens, and things like that. But when you look at the various tracks or when you look at the tokens, it doesn't quite gel. Like when I see these cassettes, you know, these yellow, red and purple ones, right? These are supposed to be memory tokens. I don't really assume like a cassette with memory and the idea that these are memory tokens. So some of the terminology gets a little bit lost in translation. But as you read the rules to learn the game, it is a fairly, you know, it's fairly text heavy, although there are some pictorial examples to help when necessary. But I didn't find it as much of a breeze as other games of this weight to learn. There was just a little bit of like, hang on, that's worded, so wait a minute, so I put this here and then that moves, so what's a presence? Hang on, what's a presence? And it explains a few of the core concepts like early in the book, but then consistently references them as you go through the book, and that makes it a little bit confusing. I wish they'd just explain the concepts as you go through the book. I'm never a fan of this idea that it explains key rules up front, but then you have no context for what those key rules mean until you read the stuff about the actions and the turn summary. Just talk about them as you go through the turn summary so that you can effectively play the game as you learn. You know, that sort of thing works a lot better. So it's not like the worst rulebook ever, but I did find it just a little bit fiddly to get my head around it first. Trust me, you know, I've seen worse recently, and certainly I've gone on rants on that, but this one was okay. It just could have been maybe a little bit better, and maybe the turn summary could have had some iconography to assist with the like the wording on it, because it is basically just, again, a wall of text. But you know what, I'll take any reference aid over none at all. You know, not a problem with that.
But you wanted more?
The game also lacks any sense of interaction. There's just not a lot present. You know, you really don't do anything with other players. You don't block each other on the board. You can go where you like. If somebody goes to the same location as you, whatever. The only interaction in this game of any kind is the friendship marker and the mimics. That's it. And they are pretty small things. I mean, you've either got neutral friends that you meet just at the various locations, or if another player is there, you can just happen to take their marker. So they're just basically another marker in the mix. The only real thing of interaction is the fact that if somebody has taken a trait tile and you have a mimic token, if you meet the criteria, you can mimic that token. So can everybody else. So it's not like you're blocking anybody else from doing it. But it's just basically like having another public objective that somebody has put onto the table. Big whoop. You know, it's some interaction, but it's pretty minor. For the rest of this game, you are basically playing a solitaire puzzle with your board, and I would have just liked a game that's all about life experiences to actually have you do, I don't know, some more interactive experience with other players at the game. So there's not really a huge benefit to playing this with more, like, greater numbers of players, because it doesn't add anything apart from time length and potential analysis paralysis. You can play the solo mode in this game, which basically has you team up against the bot. It's just the back of the rulebook, and it has a few rules changes. Would have liked some pictorial examples as to how it works as well, because there are some differences here, but it's not too much additional information to learn on top of the game, although I do recommend, because of the way the book is worded and the terminology, I recommend you do a dummy playthrough first before you tackle the solo mode. I would certainly recommend that. But the solo mode is fine. You play against an automner, it does things in a similar way to a second player would, and you're trying to beat them in terms of victory points. So you at least have an opponent, you get to do all the funky puzzles on your board, but you don't have that extra time span wasted on having the multiplayer session in there where you're not actually doing it with other people. But it's a shame. I just would have liked something. You don't have to attack other players, but have me care that, you know, they're sitting at the table, you know, for reasons other than just they're nice people to hang out with. I kind of would have liked just a little bit of, like, oh, what you're doing is really going to influence what I do, or the board state is influenced heavily by the other players, which will influence your actions. Nah, the board might as well just be your own. Nobody blocks you at it, so you can go do what you like, and that's just, it's a bit of a letdown.
This is why Superman works alone.
Replay value is probably a little lacking as well, because there's not really a ton of variety in the game. These memory cards are, you know, rinse and repeat on the pictures, the bonuses are kind of, rinse repeat as well. I mean, one card you here gets you free willpower and a red memory token. Well, there's another card that does the exact same thing, so there are duplicates in this pack. The trait tokens, cool, you'll find different ones in each game, but they're relatively simple ones in there. Your objectives that you start the game with, they come in various categories, so they're not going to vary dramatically. The 10 locations won't change. The only thing that even remotely changes on the board is the bus stop bonuses, which are randomly assigned and move around at the end of each round, which is quite neat. They will just be in different locations, but that doesn't really change the game dramatically. So each game is going to feel kind of the same. You can't really say, right, I'm going to munchkin physical activity this game and ignore the other mood swing tracks. No, you're doing a little bit of everything. You have to in order to do well in this game. There is no specialization route in this. It's what can I do with all my mood swings? How can I keep everything in check to do well? And so the games are eventually going to feel a little bit on the samey side. It's a fun little puzzle to do, but it's not one that I think I would want to bring out too often in case it started getting a bit repetitive. So for the final verdict on Coming of Age, it's a nice game. It's a nice, pleasant, lightish game, light to mid-level weight, and it evokes a good amount of theme, just not as much as something like Pursuit, and I think the comparisons probably need to stop between the two. These two, if you're going to compare the two, Pursuit of Happiness kicks this one to the curb, easily, but I would certainly rather play this than the original CV-Lution and those sort of games, because I think this one is a bit more entertaining. But that being said, you do have to put up with the fact that it is basically a solitaire puzzle, not a lot of interaction in the game. The rulebook will take a little bit of a couple of read-throughs to get used to. It's not a breezy game. You better have a good teacher if you're going to learn this from someone else who can really get you to understand what the terminology means, particularly for some of these tokens and that. But overall, you have a nice little funky puzzle to do with the mood swings on your character, and it's nothing too brain burny. It's just light, a little bit of fun, but probably maybe a little bit more in depth than typical games of this nature. So it's not blown my mind. Sadly, I was kind of hoping it would, but it's still light and pleasant and worth a try. I'm giving it a 7 out of 10 as a good recommendation. It was a good game, but I can't see it being like a keeper for me personally. Certainly, I will definitely keep that one in close proximity over this. But this is pleasant. It's made very well. There's a good amount of production and artwork here. You are paying for it, but there's a good amount here. And, it's got a decent amount of theme, and if you want just a solo game for this, maybe like a 2-player game with you and your spouse just to have a bit of fun, then this one I think will actually do you quite well. I can't say I recommend it for 3 and 4 player, because you're just not really getting any extra benefit from playing it at 3 and 4, and you've already got a solo mode in there that isn't too complicated, so you might as well just stick with that and a 2-player at the best of times. But it's a 7 out of 10. It's good, just not overly mind-blowing, which is a shame because that's kind of what I wanted to see, but you know what, I'll take a 7 out of 10 as my first game for 2026 to review.
Am I so out of touch? No, it's the children who are wrong.
So that's it for me on the Broken Meeple. Please thumb up this video whenever you see it online. Please check out the Patreon if you want to help support the channel. That allows me to get these games for a review, because a lot of these games I do not get as review copies, so they've got to be funded somehow. But also let me know in the comments what you think of this game, Pursuit, whatever, maybe concentrate on this one, but let me know your thoughts, good and bad, as to whether you enjoyed this, didn't like it, what bugged you, anything you agree or disagree with. I like to discuss in an open forum. So until next time, remember, it's only a game, and I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple video. Take care.